Good afternoon, Charles Moscowitz. I want to talk a little bit about what I would call the slow motion coup and why that has occurred and why it is occurring. I'm not an expert on the subject. I only know what I read in the paper. Obviously, I don't have any inside information. But I want to make a few observations. I think that when you look at the mainstream media, the left-leaning media like MSNBC, which is really out to get the president, they are fully and consciously and wittingly participating in this coup. It's quite obvious from especially MSNBC. They know better. They're going to dissect everything that the president does and try to put it in the worst possible light. And they want to take him out as best they can. And back in the old days, when the media was sort of monolithically controlled by just the big three networks, and they would all come on and say the same thing, and you had Walter Cronkite sitting up on his high stool and announcing, that's the way it is, then they could have gotten away with it. I suppose in a way they did get away with it with the coup of Richard Nixon. You could even argue about the Kennedy assassination. When a president is not doing what they're supposed to do, when they're not part of this sort of new international order, this move toward world province, when they're not pushing the Eastern Seaboard liberal establishment agenda, then they know they can be taken out of office. And I think the same tactics are being applied to President Trump. President Trump is the first citizen president I think we've had in certainly my lifetime. In other words, the first president who's not either in the government or in the military, which is part of the government, but someone who is simply a concerned citizen, a wealthy man who used his success and his ability to communicate, frankly, to achieve the presidency and to make his case to the American people, and it's a case that resonated. He doesn't play ball with this establishment, and so it seems to me that this apparatus that has built up in this country, going all the way back really to the turn of the century, and I would argue the election of Teddy Roosevelt, even before that. That he's the first person to step into that office and be elected on an agenda that's actually pro-American, which is very shocking to this establishment. The thing that I think upsets them more than anything about Trump is his simple statement that he wants to put America's interests first. That's a terrible shock to this establishment. This is why they have this bizarre agenda that there's some virtue in removing American borders by leaving the border open. Anyone can come in. Legality doesn't matter. That we have no right to control who enters the country and who doesn't. Somehow that's prejudice. So there's something wrong with that. Emotionally wrong, mentally wrong. It means you have something against other people. It's not a matter of having against anyone. It's simply a matter that a basic building block of any sovereign nation is the right to decide who enters the national home and who doesn't. It doesn't have to explain why. Any more than you or I have the right to decide who enters into our private home. It's the same principle. It's the principle that was that Jeff Jacoby, Boston Globe columnist, quoted me on talking about. The idea that you can look at this from a sociological standpoint from as a nation by bringing it down to its most basic unit, which is the home, the individual, the family. Do you have a right to decide who enters your home or not? Yes, you do. It's a natural right. It's something that exists in nature. Animals understand it. Plants understand it. But yet this twisted, irrational, perverse agenda to tell us that there's something wrong with that has been the official view of the establishment going way back. Once in a while they might make some mild statements otherwise just to get elected, but they don't mean it. Obama actually did a better job than I thought regarding managing the borders, as we found out. But not really. He didn't really, he had a long view. Like, okay, I have to do a few things right now, but in the bigger picture, we're going to gradually erase the border. Well, Trump spoke against this, and he meant it. And I think that's what scared or upset the establishment. And that's why they put in place a means to take him out of office, what I call the slow motion coup. I think that the evidence of that is overwhelming now. Especially now that we find out that they set up this phony dossier and that they took the information from some gossip website that was carried by CNN, of all places. They then sent this out to the media through their various media mouthpieces, like David Korn at Nation Magazine and others, to trumpet it. And then they used it as evidence to get the FISA court to permit them to spy on a Trump official, and through that spy, they were able to spy on President Trump, listen in on his conversations, to extract things in those conversations that they thought would hurt him and embarrass him, and then release that to their friends in the media. Obama was you could say a lot of things about Obama, positive and negative. I don't think he was the worst person in the world, the worst president. And in many ways, he was very good. But one thing that I think everyone agrees to, as far as I know, is that Obama was a control freak. He was into surveillance. He advanced the surveillance state because he wanted to snoop on both his friends and his enemies all around the world, apparently. And that Obama was all over this thing about spying on the Trump campaign. I think that's pretty obvious through his attorney general and through others. And that if you listen to the information released about the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton, for example, they're obvious and open about the fact that they viewed that they were political. It isn't the old FBI that we expect to actually do an investigation and put aside politics. They wanted to make sure that Hillary was exonerated, that she would be the next president. And once they accomplished that, they turned their guns on Trump with the Pfizer, permission to spy. And they did just that. They spied and they used information to try to embarrass him. The business about the hacking of the Democratic National Committee, whether or not it was even hacked, it probably was. There's evidence that points to it's not been shown that it was not Russia, that it was actually put on some kind of a thumb disk, that it would not have been possible for Russia to do it. Now, I'm not a tech guy, so I don't know the details. Sean Hannity has done a very good job of describing this. But it shows, what the evidence shows is that it's an inside job. That somebody on the DNC staff was able to put this information on a hard drive and get it to WikiLeaks. And one of the people involved, there were very few people in the DNC who were able to have access to the email server, but one of those people was none other than Seth Rich, who was a day or two either before or after the WikiLeaks release. He was shot dead in broad daylight in the back by some kind of more than one person. He was not robbed, he just was murdered. That, to me, looks like an assassination. And meanwhile, we find out now that the Ukrainian government is investigating Hillary Clinton for collusion with them. And other sort of stuff going on with the uranium sale by the Clinton State Department giving a green light to that, and that money subsequently going into the Clinton Foundation, hundreds of millions of dollars, Bill Clinton flying to Moscow and getting a check for $500,000 and, to do so, to deliver a 20-minute speech and all that. That looks like collusion. And yet, when President Trump goes to fire James Comey, the head of the FBI, which is something that any president would have done, even Hillary would have done it, he immediately arranges somehow, after illegally releasing information from his office, something that, government-controlled information, that would have been a crime in conventional definition. Somehow his friend at the Department of Justice, Rod Rosenstein, who is basically the Attorney General since Sessions refused to act on anything, he appoints Bob Mueller to head this special counsel office. Bob Mueller is a real corrupt figure. Anybody who's from Massachusetts is aware of his activities as district attorney here, his involvement in imprisoning 3 innocent men who were charged with crimes connected to the mafia, 2 of whom died in prison, the other of whom received a big settlement after being released. All of the families received a settlement. And then he goes on to the FBI, where he's a cover-up artist. He politicizes that agency, including refusing to release to Congressman Stephen Lynch information about the marathon bomb in Boston. Then he's appointed to this office. And they don't really, I mean, the obvious and prima facie evidence that I would present that they are political is the fact that they're supposed to look into Russian involvement in the U.S. election of 2016, and yet they didn't look at Hillary Clinton at all. All they look at is Trump. And now we find out that this Ukrainian operative released information about Paul Manafort to try to get him in trouble and make him look bad as a way of hurting Trump. And that Hillary Clinton had some fingerprints on that, apparently. This is happening right now in Ukraine. And yet, Mueller won't look into any of those things. He's only looking at Trump, which tells you that this is an attempt to, at best, harass Trump and disturb him in terms of his functioning in office, and in fact, probably trying to take him out. We know that there are a lot of these corrupt FBI agents, including McCabe and Strzok and Lisa Page and others, have been removed from their offices. They should be prosecuted. And people in the Department of Justice, like this guy Dorr, I think his name is, and his wife, who worked for Fusion GPS, this dirty trickster marketing company that was involved in putting together the corrupt dossier using Russian sources, that they're all involved in this sort of insurance policy to try to take out Trump. I think that, I hope that, I pray that, even though I'm not sure it'll happen, but I hope that the thing is finally starting to unravel. That Mueller is finally going to have to release something, some sort of a report. He can't just, I mean, ideally, I think he'd like to drag the thing along into every day that Trump's in office. But it looks like with this new sheriff in town, Attorney General William Barr, Mueller's hand is going to be forced. He's going to have to release the thing. There's going to be nothing really in it other than some stupid stuff and some embarrassing things. Maybe Trump paid off some hooker or something. Fine. Nothing illegal. No collusion and no obstruction of justice. And that William Barr, and maybe I'm putting too much hope into him, but they say that he's a pretty tough guy and a straight shooter. He is going to prosecute Comey and McCabe and Strzok and maybe even Hillary and all of these rotten, corrupt officials who have gotten away with scamming our system for so long because they genuflect to the left, so they get a pass. We can only hope. The point is that I'm bringing this up to illustrate what I think is a mountain of evidence to suggest that there has been a slow-motion coup against the Trump administration, and that has everything to do with the fact that Trump is a citizen president who is not playing ball with the establishment New World Order. I think that we can learn about the dangers of this coup, and we can also learn about the significance of his election, whether you like him or not, and what it represents. And in the 2020 election, I don't think, do we really want to go back to the days of Obama and Bush? Perpetual wars overseas, perpetual spying at home, nanny state, the destruction of the economy. Maybe the Democrats will offer someone who will stand up to that. Apparently this guy Yang is kind of interesting. I mean, I don't think that, there are people that are taking on Trump ideas. The head of Starbucks, Howard Schultz. Yes, he's liberal. I would probably oppose him on most of those ideas, but he does seem to be taking on some of Trump's business ideas. He wants to do things that work. He wants to shut the border like any normal leader would do. He wants to keep taxes low and reduce onerous regulation. So maybe we should take a look at him as well. I mean, I'm not necessarily wedded to President Trump. I'm wedded to the ideas he represents. And as long as he continues to represent those ideas and try to implement them, which is exactly what he is trying to do, then I'm going to be with him. But suffice it to say, there is a deep state, and Trump is absolutely right about that wants to take him out. And that we as the American people, we need to understand that. We need to understand that we must reestablish the concept of self-rule and balance of power, and that there's equal justice under the law, even for the left and even for liberals. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone.